This is Unrendered, our final segment. My name is Chester Connell. My guest is Dr. Timothy Harris, PhD, a professional accountant, and certainly a political activist, if not actor, and he's here to share what is happening in his little country. What's the population of your country now, Dr. Harris?
We can say around 50,000, but more like 46,000 plus. About 36,000 in St. Kitts and another 10, 11 in Nevis.
Really just a small family, and things have changed. Would you say things have changed since 1978? That's when I was last there. I was a boy, and so were you. How have things changed in that time?
Well, I would say things have changed significantly, both physically, socially, politically. Physically, you have seen developments of housing projects in areas which were once adorned with sugarcane. Politically, we have moved from that point, from having consultations with regard to independence to now where we are now enjoying somewhat 31 years or thereabout from 83 until now. We're talking, 30 going in 31 years of independence. So many things have changed.
What are your tourist arrivals like?
Our tourist arrivals are somewhere above 500,000 per year.
You have an international airport.
We have an international airport. What has been performing is the cruise-based tourism. What has not been performing is the land-based tourism.
Meaning the international airport?
Yes.
Why?
But that is where the wealth and the money comes. Because if we go back, for example, and I've been arguing that we have a tourism sector that is underperforming, notwithstanding what looks like gigantic leaps in numbers, but they are really leaps in cruise arrivals. In 2005-2006, we were having an average around 140,000 stayover visitors to St. Kitts and Nevis. And they were spending around $355 million. In 2012, the last full year for which we have data, the country was struggling to get 105,000 stayover arrivals.
What's the challenge?
And the expenditure was 255. We were down 100 million in terms of expenditure. Notwithstanding, your cruise total had gone from invisible to over 500,000.
You have one cruise ship terminal?
We have one cruise ship, and another one, we gather, has been contracted to be built.
I see.
There's an agreement.
So what's the advice? I asked this, of course, in the context that we are getting an airport. How do we capitalize and maximize on an international airport?
Well, an international airport, in my view, will make a lot more sense than, say, a cruise. Because when you look at it, 90 to 95% of all tourist expenditure come from the stayover arrivals. So that is basically airline visits. 5% coming from cruise. And the tax is greater, and therefore the revenue owned by the government and the stayover vis-a-vis the cruise. We have been unable in the Caribbean for some number of years to increase the head tax because we couldn't come together to fight the cruise authorities when it mattered.
And how do we not change, the word that comes is diabolically, but that's not really what I want to say, but how do we not lose our identity in this massive influx of mass tourism, which is what we are all becoming?
Well, we have some countries that have done very well in that. Jamaica, for example, is a destination with over 2 million, if my memory serves me well, tourists. Jamaica still remains Jamaica, and it's still Jamaica Ivory. It still promotes its product from hot sauce to wine, etc., etc. I think that is a cultural thing that we have to always be constantly promoting ourselves, our own identity. And what Jamaica has been able to do with its music, with its food, many of us have not yet been able to do. And we have a terrible leakage in terms of tourist inflows. Well, the revenue inflows, so much of it goes back out in the wine, in the food, in the butter. And so we have to be able to develop largely linkages between tourism and other sectors.
Agriculture,
for
which
example,
is a big one for you.
So not as good as it ought to be. So that the okra, the fruits and vegetables, we have to support by giving the necessary incentives for these things to grow because of the multiplying effect of employment, food security, and then the revenue saved with respect to the linkage with the tourism sector. What we do to agriculture, we must do also with respect to manufacturing.
Absolutely. Or what we do, tourism, all the benefits we give to tourism, we should give to agriculture.
I agree with that.
And when I say
in an
you,
equitable way.
When I say you, I didn't mean St. Kitts, I meant you personally, because when I look at your CV, you are very much involved in agriculture, or have been for some time. I am going to get back to the issue of the motion, but I want to ask you, when we look at economies of scale, the Caribbean is in a hopeless situation where if we're going to go forward as each island, you have 50,000 people, we have 100,000. When we look at economies of scale, shouldn't we be tomorrow looking at some functional unification?
Well, I agree, and we have started in that part. Take, for example, in healthcare, a lot of the pharmaceuticals are done through bulk purchasing and bulk organization.
That's in St. Kitts?
No, regionally, from what I understand.
Yes.
We started a program whilst I was Minister of Education, and perhaps even before then, of OECS educational reform, in which we were doing similar things across the board in mathematics, in curriculum development, etc., so that our people were learning the same things at the same time and made it easier to deal with a common examination, both CXC at general and then at Cape level and so on. So we have moved in some ways in relation to that. We still have a single currency. All these are elements of the single efforts at greater integration. And we have a long journey to come in terms of free movement of people, in terms of people not only being told that you can move, but have the sense
but what's
that when you get
what's
there,
stopping us
you
from
can
doing
do
it tomorrow?
things.
Is it the politicians or the people?
A combination, because the politicians are certainly part of the people, and in some respect they respond to fears and concerns of the people.
But you have tremendous power, as we just elucidated.
You certainly do, and then it goes back.
The Prime Minister I'm talking about.
And then it goes back to the question of whether or not we are using power for good, whether or not we are attempting to lead the people to where they ought to go. And so the selective kind of leadership, the leadership of convenience, which we have had for so long, would have to change. Because how do I vest confidence in you and in CARICOM when, for example, I have my troubles in St. Kitts and Nevis, and all I hear from a leader, well, if there's no bloodshed, if there's no carnage in the street, if they don't block up the roads, then there's no need to intervene. When it is clear that when it is clear that there has been a breach of the constitutional order, yes, we have heard people said by and large that things are normal.
So let's get back to the vote of confidence as you're doing there now in the last few minutes of the program. What is the current situation? The judge, Mr. Darshan Ramdani, has ruled, a 70-page document. Very interesting, and it says a lot about our Caribbean civilization and where we are, quoting also Professor of blessed memory, Dr. McIntosh, who made some very interesting comments about the Constitution. Where is the situation as we speak?
Well, we are still at a stalemate in St. Kitts and Nevis, in that notwithstanding the judgment, the government remains recalcitrant. And the government has been talking and perhaps may have even began to file papers for appealing the judgment as part of his long strategy of delaying the eventuality, an attempt to buy itself some time and hope that with the resources at its disposal, it can, as it were, buy the love of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The trouble will not go away by the government not doing anything about it. It can't be wished away. Because what is happening here is an abomination, it's an aberration, it is unjust. And we intend to continue to fight for democracy in St. Kitts and Nevis. For the last 3 days before I came here, every day we were outside the National Bank, the place where the speaker worked.
Tell me about that. You met the speaker, his boss. Your speaker has a boss.
Yes.
He works at a bank, and that meeting was facilitated by Mr.
General Manager Don Williams
yes.
at the bank.
You met with him and you said he was trembling. Is that really so?
Yes, he was basically
trembling with
not
anger
engaged.
or trembling with fear?
more fear, more a guilt of conscience, perhaps, if I were to presume. But by and large, I think the Speaker knows that he's compromised, that the country expects a Speaker, especially in light of the judgment, to be expeditious now in making a determination. And since the court has spoken, the 12th of February, we are now going 1 month, not a word from a Speaker. When the country itself is entangled in a political and constitutional stalemate, when the country is looking for leadership, when the country wants the instability to end, not a word from the Speaker, and it is always the Prime Minister who is purporting to speak for the Speaker. So the Prime Minister says, well, I think this is going to be appealed. But the Prime Minister has been struck from the matter by the court, who says this matter is basically the job of the Speaker, and the Speaker has a duty to bring it before the Parliament. And the court dismissed all of their substantive legal argument in relation to the motion.
So are the actions of the defendants, that is to say Prime Minister Denzil Douglas and his 4 other members, are their actions now in at variance with the instructions of the court?
Of course they are. Of course they are, because the court ruled that our constitutional rights are being infringed. And you would think that the decent thing that a responsible government will do will not to continue to transgress against the constitutional rights of its citizens, to the extent that they have, almost 1 month after the judgment, not done the right thing, tells us that the government has become delusional.
What is the air of St. Kitts? What is the atmosphere? What are people thinking and doing? How are they feeling?
I think people feel that ultimately something will give. And even as we were picketing the workplace, people were passing, tooting their horns in solidarity, saying to you as they pass, I wish I were there with you. You know, keep up the pressure. Don't give up. We have a silent majority in St. Kitts and Nevis. Imagine you live in a country where you are being victimized day by the government that is using fear factor to, as it were, whip people into complying and to give it support, targeting even business people who it thinks is supportive of the opposition team unity, and put them on a winch on, send the VAT office to harass them, and do all manner of evil designs using the cloak of government.
But what is Dr. Denzil Douglas, what is he doing? Is he under his own house arrest? Is he moving about freely? Is he greeting people? What is happening? Because the
Dr. Douglas in this January, in fact, I think had a rude awakening as to the mood of the people when he was at a private place in Port Zante, a business house, perhaps soliciting gifts, I don't know. But he was there after hours. And on that particular day, they had denied the opposition the right to hold a public meeting. And those persons, at last minute, maybe 3 hours before the meeting time, you get a call which says, we can't allow you to hold a meeting. And many of the supporters happened to have gone over to Port Zante, cornered him in the store. He couldn't come out before the police came some 1 hour after.
What is going to happen? Because honking horns and protesters peacefully marching are not going to do it. Of course, the government in India changed with Mahatma Gandhi, with peaceful protests, civil rights changes. Are we expecting to see the same changes in St. Kitts and Nevis, or is something going to happen explosively?
Well, we will hope that the explosion can be avoided. Because if I'm to follow your reason, it appears that ultimately that is where it gets. And that is why we are hoping that for a peace-loving people who want the most ennobling of Caribbean civilization, those who purport to want that, and the leaders in large numbers, by and large, must intervene to say we don't need to go there. We don't have to have the bloodshed. We don't have to have the incitement.
Are you calling
we can work this out in accordance with the constitutional
Are you calling directly to Dr. Gonzalez in St. Vincent to
I am calling upon all leaders, none excluded, individually, collectively, that they must, as a CARICOM leadership and people in whom we repose our confidence, in this hour of difficulty, in this hour of constitutional and political crisis that has gone on long enough, bring their good offices to work. They may not achieve anything, but at least history must record that in this dispute, the leaders of the Caribbean did the right thing, stood for rule of law, stood for constitutional democracy, and invited the leaders of St. Kitts and Nevis to act expeditiously to avoid undue developments in that small island state. Ultimately, what happens will depend upon the people. And I don't want now to preempt their judgment, but I certainly do know that the state of affairs is unacceptable, and we are prepared to stand to the very last, with the last individual who is prepared to stand each day until justice and democracy are restored in a satisfactory manner in St. Kitts and Nevis.
When is Parliament expected to meet again?
We don't know because our Parliament doesn't have specific time with which to meet, but we do say that whenever the Parliament is called, the motion of no confidence must be on the order paper, and it must be given priority. To do otherwise, really, is to reduce the country, and not just the Parliament. And importantly, Sir Brian Alleyne, a former Chief Justice, said that our Parliament has been reduced to a useless instrument. And you must ask yourself, how does the CARICOM leadership feel when they hear a jurist as eminent as Sir Brian Alleyne make that kind of description of the democracy within a member state? That is the real challenge which we face.
Dr. Timothy Harris, our time is up. There's lots more to talk about on this issue, and I look forward to meeting you again sometime, maybe in St. Kitts Nevis, to discuss your issue, and hopefully you'll be at a much deeper and higher stage of development and evolving.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. Look forward to continuing through your media and through other media to educate and advise the CARICOM region and the wider community about the impasse in St. Kitts and Nevis. If it can happen in St. Kitts and Nevis, it can happen in St. Vincent in the Grenadines, it can happen elsewhere. And injustice anywhere is an injustice about which people everywhere must fight against.
Indeed. Thank you once again.
Thank you much.
This has been Unrendered. My guest, Dr. Timothy Harris from St. Kitts Nevis, the Federation of. He is the political leader of Team Unity and the People's Labour Party. There's a crisis in St. Kitts Nevis, and we were discussing it here on Unrendered. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again when we next bring you Unrendered.